Chapter 14 of Mental Chemistry by Charles F. Haanel. Suggestion. Mr. C. Harry Brooks tells of a very interesting and instructive visit to the clinic of Dr. Emil Quay in a book entitled The Practice of Autosuggestion, published by Dodd, Mead & Co. The clinic is situated in a pleasant garden attached to Dr. Quay's house at the end of the Rue Jean d'Arc in Nancy. He states that when he arrived, the room reserved for patients was already crowded, but in spite of that, eager newcomers constantly tried to gain entrance. The window sills on the ground floor were beset, and a dense knot had formed in the door. The patients had occupied every available seat and were sitting on camp stools and folding chairs. He then tells of a man remarkable cures when Dr. Quay proceeded to effect by no other means than suggestion to the patient that the power of healing lies within the patient himself. There was also a children's clinic in charge of Mademoiselle Kaufmann, who devotes her entire time to his work. Mr. Brooks thinks that Quay's discoveries may profoundly affect our life and education because it teaches us that the burdens of life are, at least in a large measure, of our own creating. We reproduce in ourselves and in our circumstances the thoughts of our minds. It goes further. It offers us a means by which we can change these thoughts when they are evil and foster them when they are good, so producing a corresponding betterment in our individual life. But the process does not end with the individual. The thoughts of society are realized in social conditions, the thoughts of humanity in world conditions. What would be the attitude towards our social and international problems of a generation nurtured from infancy in the knowledge and practice of autosuggestion? If each person found happiness in his own heart, would the illusory greed for possession survive? The acceptance of autosuggestion entails a change of attitude, a revaluation of life. If we stand with our faces westward, we see nothing but clouds and darkness. Yet, by a simple turn of the head, we bring the wide panorama of the sunrise into view. The New York Times, under date of August 6, 1922, published an excellent likeness of Emil Quay and a review of his work by Van Buren Thorne, M.D. He says that the keynote to the system of treatment of mental and physical ills devised and elaborated by Emil Quay of Nancy, France, can be described in a single paragraph. Quote, "The individual is possessed of two minds, called the conscious and the unconscious. The latter is referred to by some psychologists as the subconscious mind, and is literally the humble and obedient servant of the conscious mind. The unconscious mind is the director and overseer of our internal economy. By means of its activities, the processes of digestion and assimilation of foods are carried on, repairs are made, wastes are eliminated, our vital organs function, and life itself persists. When the thought arises in the conscious mind that extra efforts toward the repair of some deficiency, either physical or mental, are needed, all the individual has to do, in the opinion of Dr. Quay, is audibly to enunciate that thought in the form of a direct suggestion to the unconscious mind, and that humble obedient servant immediately, and without questioning the dictates of the conscious master, proceeds to obey instructions." End quote. Dr. Quay, Mr. Brooks, and large numbers of persons of repute in France, England, and elsewhere in Europe have declared that the results in many cases under their direct observation have been nothing short of marvelous. Those who have not witnessed the benefits of this form of treatment, hence may incline to be skeptical, are more likely to give attention to what follows when they are informed of three facts regarding the Nancy practice. First, Dr. Quay has never accepted a penny for his treatments in the many years of his ministration. Second, he is in the habit of explaining to his patients that he possesses no healing powers, has never healed a person in his life, and that they must find the instruments of their own well-being in themselves. Third, that any individual can treat himself without consulting any other person. It may be added that a child who is capable of comprehending the fact of the conscious and subconscious mind, and is competent to issue orders from one to the other, is quite capable for the self-administration of the treatment. Quote, "For what man knoweth the things of a man save the spirit of the man which is in him?" End quote. Mr. Brooks quotes from 1 Corinthians for his title page. Doubtless, this was selected as an apt biblical reference to the existence of the conscious and unconscious minds, but neither the treatment nor this book about it dwells at length upon any possible religious significance of the methods employed or the results obtained. The single thing that has contributed largely to the recent rapid spread of knowledge concerning Dr. Quee's method of practice at Nancy is his insistence upon the benefits to be derived from the frequent repetition of this formula, quote, "Day by day, in every way, I am getting better and better," end quote. As I remarked, no great stress is laid upon the religious significance of his alleged cures, yet, says Mr. Brooks, quote, "Religious minds who wish to associate the formula with God's care and protection might do so after this fashion. Day by day, in every way, by the help of God, I am getting better and better," end quote. The secret of success in the treatment is to so beget confidence in the conscious mind that what it repeats is accepted at its face value by the unconscious mind, and as Mr. Brooks puts it, quote, "Every idea which enters the conscious mind, if it is accepted by the unconscious, is transformed by it into reality and forms henceforth a permanent element in our life," end quote. But let us see how this book came to be written, and then watch Dr. Quee at work. Mr. Brooks is an Englishman who became interested in Dr. Quee's work at Nancy and went there to observe it at first hand. In his foreword to the volume, Dr. Quee says that Mr. Brooks visited him for several weeks last summer, and that he was the first Englishman who came to Nancy with the express purpose of studying methods of conscious autosuggestion. He attended Dr. Quee's consultations and obtained a full mastery of the method. When the two men threshed out a good deal of the theory on which the treatment rests, Dr. Quee says that Mr. Brooks skillfully seized on the essentials, and he has put them forward in the volume in the manner that seems to him both simple and clear. Quote, "It is a method," says Dr. Quee, "which everyone should follow, the sick to obtain healing, the healthy to prevent the coming of disease in the future. By its practice we can ensure for ourselves all our lives long an excellent state of health, both of the mind and the body." End quote. Now let us enter Dr. Quee's clinic with Mr. Brooks. Back of the house there is a pleasant garden with flowers, strawberry beds, and Latin fruit trees. Groups of patients occupy the garden seats. There are 2 brick buildings, the waiting and consultation rooms. These are crowded with patients, men, women, and children. Quee tells him he is going to get better and adds, quote, "You have been sowing bad seeds in your unconscious. Now you will sow good seeds. The power by which you have produced such ill effects will in the future produce equally good ones." End quote. Quote, "Madam," he tells a woman who breaks into a torrent of complaint, "you think too much about your ailments, and in thinking of them you create fresh ones." End quote. He tells a girl with headaches, a youth with inflamed eyes, and a laborer with varicose veins that autosuggestion should bring complete relief. He comes to a neurasthenic girl who is making her 3rd visit to the clinic and who has been practicing the method at home for 10 days. She says she is getting better. She can now eat heartily, sleep soundly, and is beginning to enjoy life. A big peasant, formerly a blacksmith, next engages his attention. He says he has not been able to raise his right arm above the level of his shoulder for nearly 10 years. Quee predicts a complete cure. For 40 minutes he keeps on with the interrogation of patients. Then he pays attention to those who have come to tell him of the benefits they have received. Here is a woman who has had a painful swelling in her breast, diagnosed by the doctor, in Quee's opinion wrongly, as cancerous. She says that with 3 weeks' treatment she was completely recovered. Another has overcome her anemia and has gained 9 pounds in weight. A third says he has been cured of varicose ulcer, while a fourth, a lifelong stammerer, announces a complete cure in 1 sitting. Quee now turns to the former blacksmith and says, quote, "For 10 years you have been thinking that you could not lift your arm above your shoulder. Consequently, you have not been able to do so, for whatever we think becomes true for us. Now think, I can lift it." End quote. The man looks doubtful, says half-heartedly, quote, "I can," end quote, makes an effort and says it hurts. Quote, "Keep it up," Kui commands in a tone of authority, and think, I can. Close your eyes and repeat with me as fast as you can. Kapase, kapase, end quote. After half a minute of this, Kui says, quote, now think well that you can lift your arm, end quote. Quote, I can, end quote, says the man with conviction and proceeds to raise it to full height, where he holds it in triumph for all to see. Quote, my friend, observes Dr. Kui quietly, you are cured, end quote. Quote, it is marvelous, says the bewildered blacksmith. I believe it, end quote. Quote, prove it, says Kui, by hitting me on the shoulder, end quote, wherein the blows fall in regular sequence. Quote, enough, cautions Kui, wincing from the sledgehammer blows. Now you can go back to your anvil, end quote. Now he turns to patient number 1, the tottering man. The sufferer seems inspired with confidence by what he has seen. Under Kui's instructions, he takes control of himself, and in a few minutes he is walking about with ease. Quote, when I get through with the clinic, says Kui, you shall come for a run in the garden, end quote. And so it happens, very soon this patient is trotting around the enclosure at 5 miles an hour. Kui then proceeds to the formulation of specific suggestions. The patients close their eyes and he speaks in a low, monotonous voice. Here is an example. Quote, say to yourself that all the words I am about to utter will be fixed, imprinted, and engraved in your minds, that they will remain fixed, imprinted, and engraven there, so that without your will and knowledge, without your being in any way aware of what is taking place, you yourself and your whole organism will obey them. I tell you first that every day, 3 times a day, morning, noon, and evening, at meal times, you will be hungry. That is to say, you will feel that pleasant sensation which makes us think and say, quote, how I should like something to eat. You will then eat with excellent appetite, enjoying your food, but you will never eat too much. You will eat the right amount, neither too much nor too little, and you will know intuitively when you have sufficient. You will masticate your food thoroughly, transforming it into smooth paste before swallowing it. In these conditions you will digest it well, and so feel no discomfort of any kind in the stomach or in the intestines. Assimilation will be perfectly performed, and your organism will make the best possible use of the food to create blood, muscle, strength, energy, in a word, life, end quote. Quote, they, both Dr. Emil Kui and Kaufman, says Mr. Brooks, have placed not only their private means, but their whole life at the service of others. Neither ever accepts a penny piece for the treatments they give, but I have never seen Kui refuse to give a treatment at however awkward an hour the subject may have asked it. The fame of the school has now spread to all parts, not only France, but of Europe and America. Kui's work has assumed such proportions that his time is taken up often to the extent of 15 or 16 hours a day. He is a living monument to the efficacy of induced autosuggestion. End quote. In Regeneration, Mr. Waltimer says, quote, the last battle in which the race is engaged is now on. It is not a battle of cannon and sword, but it is a conflict of ideas. It is not going to be destructive, but constructive. It will not be a destroying warfare, but a fulfilling. It will not promote discord, but will ensure harmony. It will not knit the human family together in combinations and associations, lodges and congregations, but will individualize the race, and each person will stand alone, recognizing within himself all the potentialities that exist, recognizing within himself all the divine principles, constituting a part of the perfect whole. When man sees himself thus, he will see this kingdom within is not within him only, but within all men. We must assume that the power to do, to act, or to perform the work we give our minds to do exists in the mind. But before we entrust the mind with this work, we must have a clear conception of what is to be done. In order to regenerate the body, we must conclude or assume to be true that the power to generate life and health is in us, and we must know where it is generated and how to generate it. Could we but comprehend it, could the veil of ignorance that enshrouds us be lifted, and we be allowed to look into the storehouse of knowledge, such as the prophet or seer was allowed to look upon, Could we but climb where Moses stood and view the landscape o'er? Could we experience what Paul did during the time when he says, I know not whether I was in the body or out of the body, we would be able to comprehend what he means when he says, Eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, nor hath it entered into the heart of man, the glory that shall be revealed in us. End quote. The brain is an organ through which we communicate our thoughts to other organs in our bodies and receive impression from the outside through the mediums of the senses. Great men have by great thoughts developed a finer quality of brain than others. This leads people to think that the great mind was an outgrowth of the fine brain, when, if they will look upon the brain as any other organ of the perishable body, they will see that it is but the organ through which the mind finds expression. All attainments come in their regular order, as orderly as the movements of the sun and planets. First we desire, second we believe, third we try to believe, and fourth we have knowledge. We entertain a belief, and the belief comes into our minds and controls us. A man in the throes of poverty can throw off the shackles, and, if he can add to his belief, a suggestion to be a controlling influence must be a positive suggestion left undisturbed. It must be regarded by the person entertaining it as a fixture in his life, not subject to change or modification. Still, another method of making an application of the principle of suggestion is described by Mr. J.R. Seward of Hamilton, Mont. He says, quote, I am a man 36 years of age and have a family, and they rejoice with me that I am free from the use of tobacco. I chewed, or rather ate the weed for 15 years. Didn't mean to form the habits when I started it, but thought that it was conducive to my growth from youth to manhood. After the habit had grown on me for several years unresisted, I discovered that I was in the grip of a slowly but surely growing octopus that had me freely within its embrace, and I was helpless to release myself. I had followed carpenter and shop woodwork for trade, and all woodworkers know that there is something about lumber that makes a man want to use tobacco. When I got so that I had to chew all the time and the strongest I could get and then was not satisfied, I began to wonder where I was headed for. Slowly the idea that I was a slave to the weed dawned on me, and I began to think about cutting down on it or out altogether. I will now explain to you the way in which friend wife broke me of a vile habit and convinced us both of the marvelous power of suggestion when properly applied. At about the time that I struck bottom, there came to my notice some literature telling of a power of directed thought, and I became interested in the study of that, and also in some inspirational literature which later came to my notice. I was rather skeptical at first, but as I read and thought and commenced to look for proof in the events of our daily lives and in our environment, the truth commenced to dawn upon me. I began to see and know that life manifestations were fed from within and grew from within, and if the within be in a state of decay, it invariably showed without. In fact, I know now that the man of Galilee said something when he said, quote, As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, end quote. If he thinks himself a slave to tobacco or other obnoxious habits, so is he. He must think himself free to remain free. But to think oneself away from a habit that clings as close as thought itself is a hard matter unaided. At the time we tried suggestion for the elimination of my tobacco habit, I slept in one bedroom with one of the children, and wife slept in another bedroom with our then youngest boy, about 8 months old. As often is the case, she had to be up at times during the night to wait on the baby, and it was at those times that she gave me mental treatments while I was asleep. It isn't necessary to be in the same room, though it is all right if it happens to be the case. While I was sleeping, she would visualize herself or mentally project herself as though she was standing or kneeling beside my bed and speaking to me. Her suggestions were of a constructive and positive nature, rather than of negative. It went something like this, quote, You are now desiring freedom from the tobacco habit. You are free and desire to enjoy mastery more than indulgence. Tomorrow you will want only about half the normal amount of tobacco, and each day it will be less until you are free within a week, and shall never have any more craving for tobacco. You are master and free, end quote. She made the above suggestions in substance to me each time she was awake during the night, and I do pledge on oath that within 6 days from the time she started treatment, I had completely quit craving tobacco and quit using it. That has been several months ago, and today I am more master of my habits of thought and word indeed than ever before in my life. I have changed from an underweight, nervous wreck to a full-weight, healthful, strong, energetic, and clear-thinking man, and everyone who knew me remarks how differently I look and act and seem. Since that time, I had followed the study and the practice of constructive and directed thinking." End quote. You know that in the wireless telegraphy or telephony, they use an instrument called the tuning coil that vibrates in harmony with the electrical wave or vibration of a certain length. It is in tune with that particular tune of wave, and consequently they are in harmony and allow the vibration to go on the other receiving instrument unhindered. Yet, there may be other wireless vibrations of a higher or lower tune or key passing at the same time, yet only those in harmony are registered by the receiver. Now our minds are just the same way as we regulate our tuning coil by our willpower. We can tune our minds to low vibration thoughts such as animal impulses of nature, or we can tune them to thoughts of an educational or mental nature, or we can, after some qualifications are met, tune ourselves to receive purely spiritual thought vibrations. This power constitutes the divine power that is given to man. Of course, you will readily see that there never was a primitive hut or modern mansion built without the application of this principle of directed constructive thinking and visualization. The backbone of salesmanship of all kinds of the understanding and skillful use of suggestion. When cleverly used, it tends to relax one's conscious attention and warm up and quicken the desire until a favorable response is gained. Window displays and counter displays, as well as illustrated advertising, all rely on the power to drive a suggestion into the very center of desire, where it grows to the point of action if in harmony with the thought vibrations of the desire. If the desire does not recognize or is not in harmony with the suggestion, it is as, quote, "seed that has fallen upon stony ground," end quote, and is without harvest of action. Thought and action do produce mental results, as it is easily verified in the builder and his plans, the dressmaker and her pattern, or the school and its product, all in harmony with the leading constructive thought. The quality of thought determines the measure of success in life. Quote by Goethe, "All truly wise thoughts have been thought already thousands of times, but to make them truly ours, we must think them over again honestly, until they take root in our personal experience." End quote. End of chapter 14.